Welcome everybody to today's webinar entitled Aiming for Extra Credit with K-12 Recycling and Waste Reduction. My name is ALEC COOLEY. I'm a senior advisor here with Busch Systems, and I will be the moderator for today's program. And some of you have attended some of our previous webinars, but for those of you who haven't, this is part of a roughly bi-monthly series, our Green Thinking webinar series that Busch Systems puts on, where we explore best practices, case studies, showing examples of how we build effective recycling and waste reduction programs. With this particular webinar, we're returning to a topic that we did last August of 2021, focused specifically on the K-12. We're going to be exploring a whole range of issues from how to implement programs to addressing operational issues and other topics as we have time to get to them during our next 90 minutes. I'm excited to be joined by an excellent panel of local program managers who are going to be sharing their experience of what they're doing on the ground with their local districts. We will start off with Mandy, BYDALEK, who is Assistant Sustainability Coordinator with Lincoln Public Schools in Nebraska. Then we will have OLAFSON, who is Sustainability Coordinator with Calgary Board of Education in Alberta, Canada. And then finally, we'll have Amanda MORTL, who is a zero waste specialist with the Austin Independent School District in Texas. So we're going to start off with a series of just brief presentations from each of these, just to introduce their programs, give a very high-level overview, and then we're going to reserve a majority of our time for more of a free-form conversation where we're going to jump around from various topics for more of a deep dive on what they're doing with their local programs. So we're gonna start out with just doing, as I said, a quick run through each of these presentations. I'm gonna hold questions for the time being, just so that we can get through each of these, and then with questions that come in, we may take some of them following the presentations. In other cases, I may save some of the questions that come in because I know they're gonna fit with some of the specific panel topics that we'll cover. So fear not, if you do submit questions, we may not get to them right away, but the goal is to get to as many of these as possible. And a quick note, we are excited to have a lot of folks from California specifically. As for those on the West Coast are familiar, there's recent legislation there, SB 1383, that it's mandating food organics collection from K-12 as well as other jurisdictions. So for those of you who are here from California, this program is a very national and Canada and US focused, so we're going to be very general. We're not going to be going into specifics about the 1383 legislation or the mandates or what's involved with that. But I do want to point out that there are some excellent resources out there. You should see in the chat in just a moment a link that will take you to the Cal Recycle website that has a very specific requirements around the 1383. So for those of you who want to take a deeper dive in that direction, check out that link that you'll be seeing in the chat in a moment. And for everybody else, as I said, we strongly encourage make this as interactive as possible. With webinars, that the downside is that we don't have the ability to really have an open conversation, but to the extent we can, we want to encourage folks to share your experience in the chat. As we're talking about different topics, we'd love to hear, what have you done? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there things, alternate points of view that you would like to offer? So I encourage you to use that chat at any point during the program to drop some of those observations into and share with other attendees. Separately, we also encourage questions for the panelists. And as I said, we'll come to those as we can. But just a point of order, if there are specific questions that you want panelists to actually respond to and actually have verbalized, put that into the Q&A function on your dashboard, which is separate from the chat. If it goes into the chat, we'll just use that for back and forth discussion in the chat, but I won't actually be reading anything that comes from the chat into the narrative itself. So if you want questions actually addressed, put those into the Q&A function. And again, we'll do our best to cover as many of those as we can. One last note, we are recording this program, and the the slides and recording will be posted to our website in the next couple of days. We will also, a number of the resources that we will be dropping into the chat during the program, we'll also make the links to those available for folks who want to follow up with some of the specifics that we're hearing from our panelists today. So look for an email coming in the next few days that'll show you how to find all of these resources. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. And let me welcome Mandy BYDALEK with Lincoln Public Schools.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Mandy BYDALEK. I'm the Assistant Sustainability Coordinator for Lincoln Public Schools here in Lincoln, Nebraska. Next. And just to give a little bit more context, our district also has a sustainability coordinator, Brittany Albin, and she helps with our waste initiatives, but she also focuses on other topics like energy usage in our district, transportation, electric vehicles, curriculum connections, and a whole bunch of other opportunities. But my position is mostly focused on our waste for our district. So this slide just kind of gives you a scope of how large we are. We serve over 42,000 students and 8,000 employees. We have 7 high schools starting in August. We have 12 middle schools and 40 elementary schools, as well as all of our other operations in district and focus program buildings that we have for our students and operations. Next. So we have a large district and a large population that we need to manage their waste. So we actually have a 50% diversion rate goal each month for our entire district. And we have waste diversion programs in place to help us reach that goal. So this includes collecting traditional recycling like paper, cans, cardboard, and non-traditional items like our milk cartons, books, electronics, and other materials. And then we also collect organics for composting in addition to our refuse. So we have a private contracted hauler who picks up our materials and brings it to processing facilities around Lincoln, Nebraska and Omaha, nearby city. So all of our recycling goes to either Green Quest or First Star Fiber, which are both recycling processing facilities. And then our composting actually gets hauled just a little ways outside of Lincoln to a dairy farm called Prairie Land Dairy. And then currently we are also in a bond to build new buildings and renovate existing buildings. So aside from our typical waste that we are managing, we are also managing construction waste. Next. So these are our 2021 construction totals for all the projects that we had going on this last year. And we actually have it written into our project guidelines that any new construction projects, renovation or new builds have to have an 80% diversion rate goal. And so we try and keep them accountable for this. I sit in on those construction meetings and check in about waste diversion efforts. We also conduct routine site visits and go out to the construction sites and check their roll-offs and communicate with any of our contractors if there's contamination issues, if they have any questions or want us to come out and educate some of their subcontractors so we can all be on the same page and reach the goal. And so we have different categories that we collect. Some of them are wood, metal, concrete, PVC. And so we kind of have to partner with our community to see where these materials can go and what we can do with them and how we can best manage everything. Next. So for the waste within our buildings, we have a cafeteria compost program in all of our traditional schools. And this is a program where students are able to sort their waste for a food share table. If they have any food that is unopened, they didn't eat it or sealed, and it is acceptable to go on the food share table, then other students can come and take it if they would like seconds or some other food to supplement, and sometimes it's used for after school programs. And then we also have a station where they will empty their milk cartons and drink beverages and then recycle those. Then they get rid of all the landfill, plastic, foil, styrofoam into that landfill bin, and then they compost the rest of the organics left on their tray. So at the beginning of each school year, we try and make an effort to go to every school cafeteria and support the custodial and supervising staff by reminding students about the composting process. And then we just are a resource and see if any changes need to be made, if the setup needs to be tweaked, or if they need new signage or anything like that. And then as far as our classroom setups, next. We have, typically in our classrooms, we have both a trash and recycling bin. But from classroom to classroom, it can look a little bit different as far as availability to recycling. So those bins might look a little bit different. They might be a different color. They might be the wrong size. They might be a really old, outdated bin. So for the past couple of years, we have offering to do container resets at all of our buildings. And this is a process where we right size all of the containers to fit the needs of that space, and then label everything as a standard waste station. So a standard waste station is just that one recycling bin and one landfill bin side by side and next to the door. So that makes it way easier on custodians when they clean, makes it easier on students and staff to find exactly where the bins are if they're moving classrooms often throughout the day, and it makes it easy to sort and know exactly where your waste is supposed to go. And then we also offer whole school composting. So when we do a container reset, if a school is interested in also composting in classrooms, then we set that up. And that's the picture on the top right. It has our whole school composting set up with a small hanging landfill bin, our compost bin, and then our paper recycling. And this is really easy to implement at an elementary school because typically we don't see many outside items coming into the classroom from elementary students. So it's way easier to manage that waste. And we have actually set up a couple schools just this last year with that whole school composting. And so our waste efforts are very rigorous. We try and do the best that we can, but it's not worth much if no one really knows what we're doing or why they need to be sorting. Next. So we try our very best to stay engaged with our schools through multiple avenues. We have our Green Schools Recognition Program that kind of keeps us connected onto what garden clubs or eco clubs are doing in our school buildings. And then we also have Sustainability Champions, which is a designated staff member at each of our sites who is in contact with our team and gets our emails and that sort of thing. We also try and find any curriculum connections that make sense already that's being taught in the classroom. And our team actually goes out in the fall to all of our elementary schools and teaches their garbology science unit in all of our kindergarten classrooms. So that's a really fun time. And then we also present at staff meetings and send out monthly newsletters just to kind of get our projects out there and kind of gain some traction with our district and see if anyone wants to help us out or if we can help anyone else out. So I know I flew through this very quickly, and I thank you for letting me share what our waste diversion efforts are like in our buildings and in our district. Next, you can reach me on my email via this slide. And if you have any questions or want to make future connections, just shoot me an email. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mandy. That was fantastic. And let's just move right on, and I'll invite Amanda MORTL to join us. I'm sorry, I'll invite OLENA OLAFSON first to go, and we'll hear from her case study with the Calgary Board of Education.
Sounds great. Thanks, Alec. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are located. I am broadcasting from Calgary, which is on the traditional territories of Treaty 7 and Métis Region 3. I'm OLENA OLAFSON, the Sustainability Coordinator with the Calgary Board of Education. Next. So here's a little bit about who we are as an organization. We're the largest public school board in Western Canada and the 5th or 6th largest in Canada. There's a few Ontario school boards that are larger than us. We are over 125,000 students, about 14,000 employees in over 250 sites across the city of Calgary. And our schools range in age from being built in the early 1900s to just open last year. So we have a very wide range of architecture across our city as well. Next, please. So a little bit about kind of our high-level policies, because this is where our waste reduction initiatives tie into. So we have operational expectations around environmental impacts across our system on the facility side. We also have results, which are our trustees' expectations for how we develop our students in our schools. The education plan kind of drives our whole system organization. And under all of those high-level environmental policies at the CBE sits the sustainability framework, which is where we declare our waste reduction targets. And under the waste reduction target is how we've developed our waste reduction strategy. Next. So why a waste reduction strategy? Our current target, so just newly released, you are the first to hear it in person. End of April, we presented our CBE 2030 sustainability framework to our board of trustees. And so now we are in the process of making this document public, and our waste reduction target is to reduce waste going to landfill by 90% from 2007-8 levels. So we've been doing a lot of piecemeal waste reduction efforts across our system before 2007-8, but that is kind of the year that we sort of started doing strategic system level efforts and really starting to benchmark and measure our waste reduction efforts. And so we are aligning to a goal of zero waste by 2050, which is a federal target as well as a municipal target. We also like to reduce our carbon footprint, so trucking our waste to landfill, and comply with city bylaws. Next. So our city, the city of Calgary, has a waste bylaw, and this waste bylaw requires Calgary businesses and organizations to source separate our waste at each of our sites and to dispose of them properly. And this bylaw also has some information and rules around the contamination of waste and also what you are allowed to take to landfill. So over time, there will be different landfill bans, and then there'll be penalties associated with those landfill bans. And so there's a whole lot of information on the City of Calgary website around how Calgary businesses and organizations comply with these bylaws. And we've really partnered with them, especially around communication, so that what happens at school is what is happening at home, and what's happening at business, and vice versa. Next, please. And so how are we doing all this? Well, over time, we've come up with a standard bin setup that happens in all of our schools. So we have centralized bin stations and then also different classroom bin offerings. We offer waste, recycling, and organics pickup to each of our school sites. We have developed a school-based recycling program, best practices. And the reason it's a best practice is because each of our school operates like a mini community within our big community of the CBE. And they sort of take these best practices and make it their own and work at the program in the way that works best for them. And we also have some system recycling programs. So these are programs where we collect specialized equipment and products and dispose of them, either collect them centrally, so our distribution services will bring them to a central location and then we dispose of them, or they are picked up from the sites, but it's a separate pickup process. Next, please. And so where are we now? In 2020, we had a waste reduction target of 80%, and we just about reached it. We got to 78% by the end of 2020, and it was COVID that actually negatively impacted our waste reduction numbers because there was a big scramble to clear up our schools and classrooms and get rid of clutter and get rid of all of our soft furnishings. And so this was a positive thing on the health side, but a bit of a negative impact to our waste reduction numbers. But numbers are what they are, and we just keep moving ahead to try and reach our targets. And so now we're at about 82% waste reduced from landfill, and we're starting to do a little bit more diversion tracking in addition to waste reduction tracking. And on the left-hand side, you'll see a waste report that we produce twice to 3 times a year to schools so that they know how they're doing in terms of their own waste reduction efforts. Next, please. And so next steps, getting to 90%. And so we will start or continue to work with our high waste producing sites. So we have a waste and recycling coordinator on staff, and this is her main focus. Her portfolio of work is to work with our schools on their waste reduction efforts. Her name is Deborah Waynes, and her contact information is coming up. And she supports schools in their waste reduction efforts. We have had educational support in the schools, so people doing presentations either by external service providers or in-house educators that kind of help keep up the momentum in what goes into what. And we also are starting to increase our participation in the Eco Schools program, which is a certification program for environmental learning and action. And so kind of all of these things are going to help us get to that 90%, including looking at the start of the supply chain and our purchasing practices and policies, and whether we need certain things in the first place. So looking at the reduced part. Next. And like Mandy, that was a super quick overview of what we've been doing for the last little while, but certainly if you have any questions, you can pop them in the Q&A and chat, or please reach out to myself or Deborah Waynes, our waste and recycling coordinator, for specific questions about our programs. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, OLENA. That was great. And yes, I will take responsibility up front for these very brief presentations. Sort of our logic here is to get a very high level overview, but then we're going to come back to a lot of these topics and go into more depth with our panel discussion. So from there, then let me invite our last panelist, Amanda MORTL, who is with the Austin Independent School District, their zero waste specialist. And Amanda, I'll let you take it from there.
Oh, I can't turn on my video by myself. So, oh, there you go. Hi, y'all. I'm from Texas. I guess you can tell just right away with that. Oops. I'm happy to be here and talk about our zero waste journey over in Austin ISD. I'm the zero waste specialist, and on this slide you have an evergreen email address for our department, our team, and a web page where you can find a lot of the information that we'll have here as well. So I'm really glad to be here and glad to learn from my panelists. And we'll go to the next slide. To just give you all some context about what Austin ISD is like. We are an independent school district, which means although we're in the city of Austin, but they are 2 different governmental entities, and we're not like within the jurisdiction of the city. What that means, and why I'm mentioning it, is that the city has an ambitious 90% diversion goal. By 2040, that's their goal. And although we're in the city, we're not actually held accountable to that goal. That sounds like, oh, we're off easy, but that also means we have a little bit less support than we might have otherwise. And so we're going to be talking about leveraging partnerships, leveraging community, and leveraging everything we can to get the job done and get to zero waste, because although we're not beholden to that goal, we did unofficially, informally adopt that goal for ourselves, along with the city, so that we can work with each other parallel. So first of all, we have around 74,000 students, and we have 125 schools. But I did check, and as far as buildings are concerned, when you include portables, we have 531 buildings, including portables. So I'm just saying that because we have a lot of different spaces that our housekeeping staff have to navigate. And so it's just a lot of different shaped buildings and stuff that we're working with. And then we also have about 12 million square feet of buildings. And that if you include the portables, it'll be over 14 million square feet. So one of the things I want to point out here is, you know, our diversity and also the amount of economically disadvantaged students that we have. And the high number of English language learners that we have. We have a great diverse population, but not everyone walking through the door comes with the same amount of resources. And so we're always trying to center equity in our work and making sure that all of our schools are receiving, you know, the same quality no matter what. And when we build a new building, we use bond funds, and every time we build a new building, these buildings are in alignment with Austin Energy Green Building Standards, and then of course LEED rating. So all of our new buildings have, you know, that construction diversion rate that LEED requires. And so that's just kind of a note that as we build new buildings, they're kind of coming fully ready to divert at a very high level. And then something else I just want to point out is that we have a very high cost of living relative to the rest of Texas. And so that impacts what we can do with some of our money. So thanks for that. And the next slide. Here's our team. Notice I did not call it a department. We don't have a sustainability department. When you see all these people on my slide, you're going to notice that they're in different departments. So our outdoor learning specialist is actually in the academics department. Our executive chef, our food service department actually does a lot with zero waste, and so they're in that department. We have a lot of people working out of our service center, which is like our energy and water manager. I work out of our service center. We were able to add someone from our procurement department onto this team so that we can hopefully impact some procurement decisions, and make more sustainable type purchases, environmental preferred products. And so I will note that this, I note on here, this is the 2021 team, because we are shifting our org chart a little bit like right now, because of course of our, the way our funding structure is, having a balanced budget to be able to go out for a bond is very important. And so some of these positions have actually been eliminated for this next year. And so I wanted to bring that up really to kind of show that, this is an ongoing struggle, and sometimes you have to keep rebuilding yourself as things change. So some of these names will not be here next year, and that's actually including mine. So I'm going to give you an evergreen email address for me later if you have questions for me. This is my next slide. I'm ready for that because we have our team, and along with our team, those are all of our staff, but we have community support with something called the Environmental Stewardship Advisory Committee, and they have a lot of content experts in this committee. I meet with the Zero Waste subcommittee of that advisory group, and they act as a support network that's community-based, and of course our staff facilitate those meetings. And so these three goals that you have up here are from our sustainability plan that was co-generated by this advisory committee. And so this is where I mentioned we aligned ourselves with the City of Austin goal with this sustainability plan that we wrote, and we were hoping to develop procurement guidelines for the whole school district. I'll mention that the food service department has their own procurement guidelines that I'll get into. And then one thing that we'd like to do also to reduce waste is to find ways to share surplus materials, circulate them in a way that doesn't add extra work, so that we're, again, maybe buying less supplies because we're sharing and recirculating internally. As a side note, that's a project that the City of Austin is working on for itself. And so again, I'm hoping to really, leverage and work in parallel with the city. The next slide. Okay, so here are our waste streams. Our district-wide waste streams, which is basically like every single campus has these streams. We have the landfill, of course, single stream recycling, which includes cardboard, paper, glass, aluminum, all together. paper, cardboard, metal, glass. Sorry, there's a song, and metal. So those are, you know, in the schools. And in the cafeterias, you have cafeteria composting. Now we serve lunch mostly in the cafeteria, just kind of standard practice, but we also, because it's so important for our kids to get fed, we also have breakfast in the classroom, which means that we have decentralized trash for these large events, which does make it harder. But so we don't have like what we call mandatory composting in our classrooms because we don't yet have the infrastructure to make that possible. So we really try to encourage like this optional classroom composting, and we really try to support the teams and get them what they need, help them develop procedures at their campus to make it happen. But like I said, our composting is officially in the cafeteria, and then some eco teams are expanding out into their classroom. We also, of course, are in LEED compliance with our new buildings with our construction waste, so we're recycling that. And then, of course, in a compliance with LEED, you also must be able to recycle your batteries, your e-waste, and in addition, you do make money off of selling scrap metal. So if we have scrap metal, we're able to sell that to a scrap company and get a little bit back into our general fund. We also, because you know we transition a lot, building new buildings, moving schools. We do have surplus furniture, at least at this point, and so we do our best to recoup costs. We have surplus sales that is organized by our warehouse department, and that's through the state also. And so I just wanted to mention in this case that it's not necessarily diversion, but what does help us in addition to having these diversion practices, our food department really does a great job with minimizing waste through their purchases, because they do purchase compostable utensils, plates, and everything like this, or if their school has a dishwasher, then they're using reusable materials. So we're participants of the Good Food Purchasing Program, which I believe once we have some time, we could even expand out into other departments, at least the kind of protocols of that program. And so I just wanted to point out, we don't have data, we don't have weight data for all three of our streams. We have our weights of our compost, we have weights of our recycling, but our provider, our waste hauler, does not provide us weights for our landfill. So I can't give you a diversion number based off of our weights. I can only give you a diversion number based off of volume, which is basically what we pay for, how many pickups per week we have picked up. And so based on a volumetric diversion rate, we're at 39%, which makes me, I am noting that I'm the third out of 3 in the diversion rate, but my mom did tell me when I was last in a track meet at a race that someone does have to be last. We all have our place, and there's still something to learn from what we have here with our low diversion rate. So I'll go to the next slide. Here's some pictures of what you might see in our schools. Notice, you know, on the top left, you have a picture of bins in the cafeteria. You're going to see our signs that we make sure that are bilingual. And also, since we just have so many languages, we did our best to just put actual pictures, photos of what they might actually see in their lunch, you know, being served, and put those pictures up on there. So it actually doesn't matter what language you speak. If you have the time and the motivation, you can figure out what goes where. In elementary schools, you're going to see that the custodians will stand by the trash can and ideally teach the kids how to sort. But since sometimes there's just that pressure with how much time you have, I do notice our custodians really helping sort, you know, maybe take over if it's slow or something in the interest of speed. And then once you get into middle school and high school, the staffing ratios don't really allow for that. And so the kids are on their own. You'll see some kids here up on the top middle. This is the 2019. This is Environmental Club. When they first implemented compost in the cafeteria for their school, which was in 2017, they had an eco team that helped stand by the bins, and those are students telling other kids how to sort, you know, for their first time after an advisory lesson and stuff. So what we find is that it really is helpful to have someone standing by that bin. And without someone standing by the bin, you're just hoping for the best. And so we really want to engage the best we can and support, especially in those upper grades. One last thing on the top right, you're going to see it's like a shadow board. I wanted to point that out because that is a construction tech class that was able to bring in zero waste into their like learning objectives. And so they had to learn how to build something, and they built this for their school. And so they found, you know, the trash items that are most likely to be thrown away, so that and they put that over the bins so that that school has, you know, a real great like show of how to do this. And also the class that built them has an opportunity to participate. So we're always trying to link this zero waste into the math class, into these classes. And as a former high school teacher, I know the learning objectives that the state of Texas requires of us. So I tried my best to help teachers create projects that will students learn their learning objectives and help our school diversion rate. So we go then, oh, these pictures on the bottom left are pictures of the buckets we use in breakfast in the classroom. Those buckets are repurposed wax, like they held wax to polish our floors. Once they were empty, we repurposed them to make little individual class buckets. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as far as you know, our engagement is concerned, we got, you know, a grant to buy a lot of the bins for many of our, almost all of our schools. The new schools use bond money to make sure that they have the right bins. And so our facilities, as best we can, are covered with things that already have been paid for, not necessarily in a general budget. Now that we need to just kind of upkeep our supply, we're gonna have to find a line item in the budget for bins. So we're trying to make sure that, you know, if you build it, they will come. We have to actually have the facility or the infrastructure there for them to be able to use it. And then now we need to engage, right? And so at the end of this slideshow, I have a link that will take you to our zero waste toolkit. And in that zero waste toolkit, I put our bin specifications for what bins should look like, of course, with the color coding and language access, all sorts of accessibility concerns. And then we have slideshows in there for y'all, posters. And then, so that is available for, is publicly available. So that means our students can go into that toolkit and get signs and slideshows for their clubs or their classes. And then in addition to just having this toolkit with a lot of online resources, on the top right, you just see like a Canvas kind of screenshot. We have a zero waste blend class, or I'm sorry, Canvas, like the online learning program, so that any school that wants to really start their zero waste journey has like the steps: form a team, do an audit, and there's like that spreadsheet on, you'll see there's an example spreadsheet of what their audit can look like. There's like a template they can use. And so some of the steps and resources are in this private blend class. They can go into this class and figure out what their pickup schedule is so that they can maybe reduce a pickup, right? Oh, we have 3 landfill pickups a week, but I think we can do 2. Let's see, right? So they have that in there. I upload the weights that they have, you know, been like for each school, they can find how much weight they've been composting or recycling. And my next step that I think will be a most effective tool, because we're really relying on these eco teams to do the work, is that they really need real-time data that's easy to access and interpret. And so right now, this data is just in an ugly spreadsheet, but I'm working on making a dashboard so that people can just really quickly see what their diversion rates are, what, you know, their pickups or whatever, and then they can compare themselves to like similar sized schools, maybe their vertical team. They can look at their numbers. And I feel like if we keep that updated and people are kind of directed to it, they can get feedback on their own progress. They can see, oh, we have this many pickups, let's change it. And then they'll notice that if they're changing the number of pickups, since we use volumetric diversion, their diversion rate changes immediately. Then finally, in our bottom right, we have a really great relationship with our waste hauler who picks up the trash, recycling, and compost. They do come to any school for a training, either live or you know, online. And that's Greg Beal from TDS. He's really great at coming in and doing those trainings. And then what I like to do is follow up and go to maybe an eco team meeting and help them problem solve, make sure that they know what all resources are available to them. And so I'm really glad to have that team with a vendor, so that we have someone who can go at any time, and then I can follow up and do maybe some more in-depth work with them as they're working on their journey. And so let's see, that's the next slide. I think might be my last slide of thank you. This web page right here is, if you go to it, you'll be able to see that toolkit where you can see my standard operating procedures for zero waste, bin specifications, and slides. And then my evergreen email address is amanda.mortal@gmail.com for if you have any specific questions related to this zero waste journey. Thank you.
Great, Amanda, thank you. That was wonderful. A good high level overview for your program. Real quick, let's do a live poll question, and then I have a couple questions I wanted to throw out to you before we switch over to the panel. So everybody, you should be seeing this poll question showing up on your screen, and when you do, go ahead and just give your response. How would you rate your recycling waste reduction programs? Let's get a sort of pulse for where you're at, and obviously this applies if you're with a school or with a district. If you're not, then you can hit that last bullet. Amanda, while we're waiting for folks to reply, a couple questions came in. The last one that came in was from Michelle. Is each school able to dynamically change their collection frequency, or is there an annual contract with the schedule that controls how that frequency works?
So yeah, we have, they have that frequency, and then basically at any time we can ask our vendor to change that frequency. So we hope to, like, if they notice that their dumpsters aren't full, they'll email me and I will, write the vendor, and hopefully we'll just real quick reduce it right then and there. And then our, what we pay is adjusted from there.
Got it. Okay, good. And well, we still have some more answers coming in. One other came in, and this will be really for everybody, but question about milk cartons. How do you guys handle milk cartons? Because they can be a challenge. This is a collection item.
Yeah, so I think that I'll start off just because I was starting, but I don't think we have a systematic anything in place for cartons like that. Each school has to do that. But what we did was we're purchasing cartons that we made sure were compostable. And so, yes, it's easier if you pour out that milk first. And maybe a school will have a system like that, but then they could also really just dump that whole thing into the compost. But then of course the bags get heavy. And so then people that are using that method of just putting them in straight in might just fill up half the bag. And so that's something that we need to work on, is like streamlining that and making sure, because, you don't really want to wet anything in a compost bag. That is a concern. So there's not a system. But since we have compostable cartons, it is helpful.
Yeah, great. Marissa, if we can go ahead and close the poll then, and we can just see the responses. So I think everybody should see this on your screen now, but it looks like a majority of those who are with the school would classify themselves still being in the beginning stages, and obviously this is very subjective, but more on the beginning and basic side of the spectrum with our attendees. So lots to improve. Fortunately, we've got a lot of inspirational examples here that we're watching. If I can bring OLENA and Mandy onto the screen, then. And I'll start off with just extending the same question. Anything that either one of you wants to add on the milk cartons specifically, and how you handle those?
Yeah, I can speak on that a little bit. We also used to compost our milk cartons with all of the rest of our food waste, but we had issues with our hauler that the milk cartons just compost at a much slower rate than all the other food and like napkins and things. And so that is why now we separate them. We have students empty the liquids, and then we place them in a barrel with a mesh liner. So any extra liquid can kind of drip out of them. And then those cartons are loosely put into a tote that is taken away by the hauler and is also taken to a composting facility. So they used to go into our compost tote with everything else, but then when that wasn't working, we kind of had to switch gears a little bit, but they're still being diverted and composted, which was the goal in the first place. So.
Excellent. Good. Olena, let me know if there's anything you want to add to that, or.
I do. In Alberta, all beverage containers, so milk cartons are included, we have a refundable program. So for all beverage containers, you receive money back. And that means that beverage container recycling is very successful across all of our schools because they use that as a fundraiser. And so I think take back programs with a bit of a refund always seem to really help because there's a bit of incentive to get that container back into the recycling stream.
Great. Good. I'll just point out, thanks, Steve, dropped a note in the chat, just putting out the Carton Council is an organization that helps with getting carton recycling programs going, and they have a lot of resources that they can point you to. So you can put them into a Google search and learn more about them, or reach out afterward and I can point you to more about them. So
I wanted to point out that we did pilot a bulk milk program that would reduce, would eliminate the cartons. That's something to consider with farmers. Great.
So we're gonna let's shift over into panel mode, and so for a couple of these topics we're going to go through. We have some visuals that I'm going to pull up here, but we're going to start out coming back to just the topic of the bins. What actual bins are you using in your facilities? And you know, each of you sort of touched on this very briefly, but if you could take another minute and talk about, you know, what is it that led you to these? What are the factors, the decision elements to how you arrived at the type of bin that you're using, as well as signage, and then whatever, to the extent that that you've developed a standard and how you're applying that across the different schools. And simply because I have your slide up here first, I'm going to put you on the spot and let you take this one first.
Sure. Yes, as part of our programming, bins and signage have been given a lot of thought over the years. So when we first kind of started this program from a system level, we had a lot of different bins across the system, particularly on the recycling and refundable side. So we actually split our recycling into two streams because of the refunds that we get for beverage containers. So that's what you see as the yellow color. But really it's the same stream except that we get money back for those bins. So we call that stream refundables. Anyway, so we over time have kind of settled on the bin sets that you see in this slide. And we like these bin sets because we can use our own signage and graphics. And the signage and graphics have been developed in partnership with the city of Calgary. And it's the same pictures and colors that they use, but we've taken kind of how Amanda spoke, like about taking specific pictures that work for a specific setting. We do the same thing with our different school types. So elementary, you'll see a little bit different pictures than a high school, for example. And where we started out with our composting program was actually paper towels. So we kind of convince schools to participate in the composting program by having them compost their paper towels in the washrooms first. And then that's kind of translated into food composting in some of our schools. And also in some of our schools, we just do boomerang lunch programs. All of our elementaries are pretty much bring your own lunch from home. We don't serve lunch in schools, which I think is a lot different from most American public schools. And so our students will take their food waste home, or we have centralized composting locations. And what else did I want to say about bins? Yeah, I think that was it. So we've landed at this place, but it was over time. And how we landed at these bins is that we started to get money for new school implementation. Budgets were provided as part of LEED certification in order to provide bin sets to new schools. And so over time, we've put in capital funding requests in order to turn over all of our existing schools to these bin sets as well. So we're not taking operational dollars in order to do this bin transition, but we use capital dollars in order to help change over schools.
Right.
And I'll just answer that one question. Is the yellow sign is all beverage containers. So any container that you drink from is a refundable container, and that's what the pictures show.
Yeah, that is somewhat unique. I've seen that with a lot of Canadian communities where you have a separate collection stream for the deposit refundables. Great. Mandy, you spoke a little bit about this, but is there anything else I guess that you would add about the system in place with bins, with signage, and how that you came to those arrangements?
Yeah. Yeah, so we actually, those sticker signs that are in two of those photos actually are Recycle Across America signs that we received. And so those have been really helpful in trying to get our waste stations to a standardized signage. And they are also dual language and they have photos on them. So it will be, the goal is for everything to look similar and standardized, and you can, you know, understand what goes in that bin, whether you read English or Spanish or not, or whether you can't even read, because some of our younger students, you know, don't know what compost looks like. So yeah, so this is something that we're trying to do in all of our buildings, especially our new buildings. Like I said, we have new schools, so we have been trying to figure out the design of our cafeteria to make sure that it makes sense with our cafeteria compost station. And these signs are for our cafeteria compost stations, and we had designed them ourselves. And we also wanted to make sure that there were plenty of photos. And it is kind of tricky because every few years we have to update our signage just because of the materials that are in our cafeteria. So typically our elementary schools have the traditional tray with the like built-in dishes. So they don't really have to use paper boats. They just kind of have their carton and then all the food is on their tray. So elementaries are really easy to manage as far as compost, but it's those middle schools and high schools that get a little tricky when there's some more materials that you're seeing and those materials change. So due to COVID and supply issues, we've had to bring styrofoam back into some of our buildings, which we got rid of it for like about 1 year probably, and then it came back because some of our compostable cups, like our PLA cups, were no longer able to get. So that has just been a challenge, and a lot of like if there's different materials coming in, some cafeteria staff will actually tape those materials to the sign so students can kind of get that 3D effect and match up, you know, this plastic dish has to go in the landfill, like I see it on the sign. And I saw a question earlier about having them at eye level. And so that's what we try and do. We have pedestal signs up so that they can have them at eye level. And then we also have them on the bins for those smaller 5-year-olds in the kindergarten and elementary. So then it's eye level for them too. So.
Great. I'm really glad that you touched on that with the eye level, because that is huge. Aside from what messaging you put on it, simply the prompt, something that is higher up. There's, I know we did a project, Busch Systems, with the University of Georgia several years ago, studying what happens when you add a sign onto the top of existing bins, and we were shown, and it backed up what we've seen with other research, which is that it has a noticeable increase, 10 to 20% on increasing participation, cleaning up contamination. So that's a really good point. Amanda, I know you guys have made a specific effort to really, implement this standardized across the system, and you pointed out that you have those actual design standards documents available on your website. But can you briefly just talk a little bit more about again, what that standard is and how you set that up.
Right, yeah, so we just wanted to make sure that, you know, those bins that we selected would be ergonomic for our custodians and they'd be accessible. And so we just made sure that, you know, the color is always going to be blue for recycling, a specific kind of blue, and things like that that were already mentioned, like the language access. One thing I want to point out is that we also suggest that our bags are different. So our landfill bags are black, recycle are clear or white, and then compost ones are green. That way, because we do use rolling carts to go from class to class, that way they can keep everything kind of sorted still until they get to the dumpster outside, and they can still kind of remember which bag goes where with the color. So that's something that I wanted to add. And then just when you're getting bins and placing them, something that we've just want to add on top of what if it hasn't been mentioned yet, we really try to reduce the number of bins so that our custodians aren't going to a bunch of half full bins. So we try to, in this project development manual, and we came up with different size trash cans, recycling bins for each type of classroom, for depending on how much traffic they have and the size of the kids. And so our housekeeping specialist helped create the document and the standards. Something we always ask is to have those bins placed by the door again, so that custodians don't have to go all the way to the back of the classroom to get a bin. And for the composting, breakfast in the classroom, just something to remember is that you have to pick that up before the end of the school day and take it out of your building so that the rats don't get to it, or any other pests that we have in Texas. And so we're always making sure that our compost exits the building by the end of the day. Hopefully our recycling is clean enough that maybe they're having a bin that can take 2 days worth of trash and empty it every other day. But we try to limit the number of bins to as few as possible. I think everyone got everything else about the bins.
Cool, great. I'm going to pull these screen share down for the moment, and we'll just talk through some more of these our topics here. Let's shift a little bit over into more operational topics, and I'll use a question that or observation that Heather offered up in the Q&A, which has to do with custodial and getting buy-in as well as administrators. So there are a lot of stakeholders that are involved, but and I from my own experience, having worked at universities, I've seen where resistance and not having that alignment can be an issue on the back of house. But I'm curious, does any one of you want to jump in and just talk about specifically, I guess, starting with housekeeping and custodial, how that relationship has worked? Are there issues? Have you found lessons learned on how best to work and cultivate them as partners with your program? And whoever wants to take that one first, feel free to just jump in.
I'll still go.
Amanda?
Okay.
That's all you.
Yes, so I know that when I go to the trainings, when we train custodians, one of the first questions I get is, I don't have time to go in the trash and fix everyone's mistakes. And so first off, no one's going in the trash. So it's just, if the recycling is a mix of things, then we do have to take it to the landfill dumpster. And so that is something that we need to ensure our custodians that we are not asking them to save the world by themselves. And we really try to develop eco teams as best we can at each campus, and make sure our head custodian is on that eco team, providing feedback for what they need. And so I'm noticing that, for example, breakfast in the classroom, if that's success, it's because of an eco team, not because the head custodian is doing it by themselves. So in elementary schools, we often see that's our top grade in elementary school, is the 5th graders. Sometimes they'll be in charge of collecting the breakfast in the classroom and centralizing it into the cafeteria for the custodians, or they might be just centralizing it in the hallway for the group. And they're the leaders of the school, so everyone looks up to them and does, so that we work with 5th graders. And then in upper grades, if there's a team that's supporting the custodians with collecting or gathering, it's oftentimes environmental science classes and also life skills classes that would support. And so we really just say, you are not alone. It might feel like it, but we're trying to make a team for each campus that they're like a star of.
Great. Mandy or OLENA, either of you want to jump in with that?
Sure. I'll go next.
Okay.
I think one of our first challenges was changing our custodial facility operator staff's definition of waste. So what is waste? And that waste isn't just what goes into the black bin anymore, but it's recycling and organics as well. So now instead of everything going into this one big bin, we're actually trying to reduce that black bin stuff and putting it into the 3 bins. And so getting and it wasn't just custodial facility operator, it was also all of our staff that have been in schools for a long time is what is our definition of waste. And like Amanda, it's a whole school effort. So it's not all on our custodians, facility operator shoulders, but it's everybody's responsibility to sort what goes into where and to work together to make that waste diversion, waste separation happen. And so our best practices actually generally state that staff and students kind of manage the waste that's in their classroom and get it to these central locations. And then our facility operations staff are the ones that manage from the central locations into the dumpsters at the back of the school. And so how that happens in every school depends on their team. And so it looks a little bit different in every site. And so in some cases, it might be the facility operator that's also managing some of the waste in the classrooms, but we do see a shared responsibility across the system. But yeah, it takes a lot of work. And if you don't have whole team buy-in at the school level, then that school is not as successful as the school where everybody's engaged and involved.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Mandy?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add. I'll just reiterate what both of them had already said. But yeah, it does take a lot of teamwork. And we try and go to custodial supervisor meetings every quarter and kind of touch base and, tell them that we're listening to them. That's why we go to the cafeterias every school year to just kind of be an ear if they have any comments or frustrations. But it does really, really help when we do have student buy-in and there's a club that's really involved. There are special education students who that's their job in the schools to collect recycling and help sort it. And so we just try our best to listen to everyone and help where we can and then support, because it is a team effort and we just want to connect everyone, if that means having a meeting with the admin at the school and the custodians so that everyone can be on the same page and we can figure out what solutions need to be made, what could we do to help this be a little bit more successful in that building.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Yeah, I would reinforce the point that's being made, which is that the custodians, they're your eyes and ears on the ground, and really they are the folks who help to give feedback, but also they make a system operate well, and they have a lot to offer. And I think there's oftentimes a perception that their voice isn't heard, that people aren't paying attention to what they're saying. But it is a critical to have their observations and their feedback if the system's going to work well. The other thing I would add on specifically on unions, because I know this can be a real issue in a lot of cases where there's just heck no, we are not going to get involved in recycling. We do waste, we don't do recycling, and creating these distinctions. And oftentimes that is just it's a local relationship, and there's not a silver bullet how you address those. From my experience, I think what does help is to the extent that you have a good relationship and there's trust, how can you step back from the system and not just perceive it as adding one thing, but is there a way of holistically looking at all the different elements of the arrangement, and can we adjust this so that it relieves some of the time pressure, which makes more room for that? So, the best example would be maybe more in the administrative offices where do you need to do desk side collection every single night for trash? Can you pull back, reduce some of that level, or even eliminate that the desk side service asks staff to go to centralized bins? That frees up time that in theory could be used to support recycling. And approaching conversations in that manner, so that it's not just simply we've been doing it this way for 50 years and now you want us to change it. I think that's one technique for how you address that. But Amanda, did you want to add something else?
Yeah, I was thinking of something while you were talking that I think will help, is hopefully going to help our custodians. We just started like a Teams group, you know, how you have like a chat group basically in Teams. And I've invited head custodians, teachers, and hopefully, and it's just started, it's only since Earth Month, but people are in there starting a conversation and going, is this recyclable? And then, you know, we chat about it. And then one teacher asked for extra recycling pickups at the end of the year for the clean out. And so I posted in there, how are other people reducing waste at the end of the year? And that started a discussion with people all around. And so it's an informal way to get ideas generated, I'm hoping. But again, it's new, so I don't have too many results for you, but it seems to be at least generating conversation and hopefully making the head custodians' jobs easier with this.
Great, good. I see a question. Go ahead, OLENA.
I meant to mention that our school district recently got our SIMS certification, which is the cleaning industry management standard, which has helped with some of our quality standards and processes on the facility operations side. So that's also helped kind of reiterate some of these best practices around waste recycling and organics.
Great, thanks. There's a number of topics I want to try and get us through. So let me keep moving. Data, how we track it, how we have get the metrics to measure our performance. And OLENA, could I just throw it out to you first? By virtue of being the one in the lead, as it were, if this is not a race, obviously, but with an 80+% diversion, that's fantastic. And as I know from our earlier conversations before the webinar, in your case, you're able to get actual data, I think, for most, if not all, of your waste streams. Can you talk a little bit more about just what that system is for tracking data, and what are the secrets to reaching 80%?
Yeah, so much like Amanda right now, and we also we're tracking volumetrically. So our 80% target, we did report on weights, but we started out volumetrically, and we're tracking that data for a long time over time. And that's where our benchmark is, because we didn't have weight data yet. But in the last 7 years, we were able to negotiate that into our hauling contracts, and our hauler has scales on all of their trucks. And so now they report to us on a monthly basis weights for our waste recycling and organics. And so we've sort of, alongside our volumetric data, we now also have weight data. We still keep the volumetric because, again, that's how we pay for our service, is based on bin size and lift frequency. And so that is still how we report out to schools, so that they can see what their reduction in diversion rates are in terms of volume. We also did a little bit of a carrot and stick for a little while with our schools, because when we started our programming, waste was funded centrally and recycling was funded by schools, because it was a school initiative. And so each school had their own contract if they so chose. And over time, we've kind of flipped that into a central contract, and also prompted by the bylaws. And so that data around what schools were paying and throwing out waste-wise, when they were reducing waste, we helped provide them a bit of a credit towards their recycling service that the school site was paying for. So we've sort of used the waste savings from a data side and a cost saving side in order to help flip how we fund all of our programs. And so now we manage all of them centrally through a central contract, and we pay for them on a central budget for all of our sites.
Got it. Great. Mandy, do you want to jump in on from Lincoln's perspective?
Yeah, so we also, it's written into our contract to get estimated weights for our recycling and composting from our hauler as well. And then we actually have refuse logs that our custodians fill out so that we can estimate the amount that's going to the landfill. And so from that, I calculate our monthly diversion reports, and then we publish that and release it in our newsletter each month, and then get like our annual totals and average diversion rate for the entire year. So that's the main way that we keep track of everything. We also have a unique opportunity to partner with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln here in Lincoln with their environmental studies program. And we are actually able to work with some students to come and do waste audits at our school. So we can get a really in-depth perspective on what is happening in the building, how much they could be recycling more, if there's any materials that seem to be confusing for the staff or students in that building, what else could we compost? Is this a good building to do whole school composting? Is it not? And so that's a unique opportunity for us to kind of measure that data in specific sites. So usually each year we do about 5 buildings with that class, and just kind of get to take a closer look, and it helps us rethink what we need to do with any signage or education beyond that. But for the most routine and regular reporting is our monthly waste diversion reports that we get.
Yeah, I love taking that information and actually publishing that and sharing that back to the schools and the students. I think we know from behavior perspective, having that reinforcing information is critical. People need to have a sense of affirmation for their effort is leading to something and feeling like you're part of a team and building that culture around it.
Yeah, and we do get emails from like high schools saying they're proud to be the top diverting high school because it's compared to all the other buildings. So it does kind of have a little competition. And then we also get emails of why aren't we doing as well and stuff like that. But yeah, it's encouraging when people look at them and think about, what they're doing every day and how that's impacting that diversion rate. Yeah,
great. Amanda, I know from your perspective, you mentioned that you're getting actual data for the recycling organics, but was it not trash? Where again, it's also based on volume estimates.
Right. So we have compost weights, recycle weights, and we don't have landfill weights. And so if we were going to do a weight-based diversion, we'd be estimating, which I didn't like to have an estimation next to actual data. So that's why I preferred having all consistent volume only categories.
Have you, it may seem like the obvious question, but if you tried running that into hauling contracts to get actual weights, and it simply has not, it's not been possible with the RFP process, or?
Yeah, we did absolutely try to get it into our contract, but we weren't able to get a vendor that was able to provide that.
Yeah. I'm very familiar with this dynamic of, I think a lot of folks we would love to be able to get actual weights, actual concrete data, because there are questions about when you're trying to do use formulas that opens variabilities, but it really depends on your local market, how much competition there is, how they're doing their operational routes, on whether it's viable to get actual weights. But
right,
we'll keep aiming for. Let's keep moving and talk a little bit more, shifting more to just how we actually implementing the program. So early on, could each of you just take a minute, give the very high level, how did waste reduction efforts first get started in your districts, and give us sort of a sense of the trajectory of how they're advancing and where you see the next steps. OLENA, do you mind going first?
Sure. So I guess where we started in sort of I guess 2007-8 era, because that's when we kind of started this whole strategic initiative, is that schools were doing piecemeal recycling programs, sort of ad hoc based on tacked on to some of the educational action programs that they were doing. And so it was really student-led and teacher-led at every school. We started to be a bit more strategic on the systems side and started to kind of get a lay of the land, what was happening at all of our schools, and found that quite a lot of our recycling streams were ending up in the waste stream, and how could we do better? And so over time, as contracts expired at the school level for recycling and at the system level for waste, we started writing in contracts or RFPs for waste recycling and organics removal from our sites. And so this kind of was prompted along by the targets that we were setting around waste reduction, but it was still more of a volunteer effort. There wasn't really a whole lot incenting schools to participate, except for that it was the right thing to do and it was in alignment with our waste reduction efforts. But what really prompted things along was the introduction of the City of Calgary waste bylaw. And so that really helped reinforce this work that we were doing at the school level and bring it to the next level, because now there was a requirement to source separate your waste at each of our school sites, and also dispose of it properly at the back end and offer all these different waste stream sorting at each of our sites. So that kind of really helped us with our waste reduction efforts. And we've really been supported by the city in terms of educational outreach. And we have some educational service providers that work with our schools, doing waste audits and waste education. And we're finding like it's becoming a generational thing. So as young people get used to this new way of sorting waste, even at home, it just comes to them naturally at school. And so they're growing up with this new way of managing waste at the school level that didn't happen 20 years ago. So yeah, so it's an evolution.
Yep. Great. Amanda, I know the city of Austin also has its own zero waste policies. Could talk a little bit about that relationship and some of the other drivers behind the districts. What has helped to drive just developing and growing the program for the district?
Yeah, so I'm really glad that we live in a city that has this 90% diversion goals, because how our program started is really from the community. And so our city has developed that goal, and then our advisory committee, like I said, had a grassroots beginning. It pretty much formed by itself with people that were really interested, coalescing and going, how can we help AISD? And when, I have a slide actually, this just kind of talks about sustainability over time and AISD. If that's on the slide deck, great, but if not, no problem, because we have that grassroots group. They write a sustainability plan, and in that plan, it was one of the things that we'd like to do is add compost to all of our cafeterias. So that we had a pilot, and then we got the goal to add compost in all of our cafeterias, starting with elementary and then adding up. And so in order to do that, you would need some kind of trainer to make sure that this implementation was done right. And so they had that also in the plan. There was not full funding available for that staff person, which was neat. So I'm going to tell you how we got funding for it. It was that we had a really great relationship with our vendor. The TDS picks up all of our waste, landfill, recycle, and compost, and it is in their best interest to reduce landfill waste. And they also they were developing an eco program to help schools reduce waste. And so we were able to create funding for this position because of a partnership with our vendor, who was able to supplement, more than half of the salary for this position that was half-time for 2 years, just to slowly, school by school, implement. That half-time position was, again, very much funded by TDS. And then AISD was able to create a full-time position for 2 years. Once composting was implemented, but of course there's still so much more to do. And so in those 2 years, I developed that zero waste class and try to create the learning infrastructure to make it so that schools had everything they need. And so we really have to leverage with our community and our partners moving forward. And then moving forward, how this position will grow is that with the rearranging, we're going to keep our sustainability director. Then this position that I'm in, the responsibilities will be subsumed into like a utility conservation engagement person. So this new person, who's coming next is going to be working with energy savings, water, and zero waste. And we will be leveraging a partnership with National Wildlife Federation, our Eco Schools program. If you want to be a green flag school, if y'all are familiar with that program, we really do use that a lot, and it helps provide a structure for our schools. And so we will be able to hopefully keep our schools ready to be green flag certified by working on energy, water, and zero waste with that person. So we're always shifting and dealing with budgets and doing the best we can. And what I hope to do is always be leveraging our partners and our community, because they really are, we have the same interests.
Yeah. Mandy, same question to you. I mean, it's fantastic having government policies and resources about, that nudge or push or help to pull a program along, but that's not the case for a lot of communities. Can you talk a little bit about from your perspective in Lincoln, Nebraska, both with it, how the program has evolved and what some of the drivers are, and touch a little bit on the funding component as well, if you could.
Yeah. So we don't really have many policies pushing us to divert our waste. And actually our program started with a part-time recycling coordinator position. So I believe the pilot started in like the 1990s for just recycling in our buildings. And then it became district-wide in 2002. So that was just the first step. And that was all it was managing the recycling. And then in about 2014, I believe, is when this position kind of started transitioning into a full-time. And that is when we began piloting composting at our buildings, and it started to kick off a little bit more. And then by 2019 is when we were a whole school, like the whole district was composting in the traditional cafeterias. So it really started kind of small, but then when we did have that compost program, our positions just kind of exploded to involve all of sustainability, not just the recycling coordinator. It was the sustainability coordinator. And so I was actually just hired through a grant, an NDEE waste reduction grant. And that's what funds a lot of our programs. Is there's a Nebraska recycling grant. We have a World Wildlife Fund grant that we just got this last year to transition some plastic cutlery to metal cutlery. So there's a lot of funding opportunities out there as far as budget wise. But I was able to come on as a waste kind of coordinating position due to that grant. And so it's just kind of slowly grown over time, and we have slowly made connections with other departments, with custodial, environmental, curriculum, and just kind of tried to get our foot in the door wherever we can. There's so much more that we could do and so many more ways that we can grow. And I think our next big goal that we would love to do is to have a sustainability plan as far as having goals with years, because we don't have that yet. And just having some committee that has people from every different part of the district be on our team, kind of like what Amanda was talking about, that would be so awesome to implement here at LPS, because right now we are just a small department of 2. So we are trying our best to, manage and coordinate everything across the district and just know what's going on. So that's why we really try and keep our fingers in with our sustainability champions and our green schools recognition program, just to hear what's already going on in the buildings and what interest there is to kind of grow these programs, and how we can just, piggyback off those really engaged and excited students and staff that are already in our district. So there's a lot more that we can do, and we have big lofty goals, but yeah, we started off small and we're still growing.
Awesome. We're just in the closing minutes here. Before we end, I would love to have had more time to talk about education and engagement, but maybe just as a real quick without having a chance to really go in depth into all the different types of engagement programs that you have, are there any sage pieces of advice, lessons learned that you would share with attendees around where you've seen the most effective way of bang for the buck, as it were, with raising awareness, with increasing the knowledge level with students and with staff? Does anybody want to jump at that first?
I can talk about that really quick. I would say my biggest piece of advice is to just communicate with your schools, because I guarantee you there is a building that has an eco club or a garden club already. And that can really be a push or like a kickoff point as far as trying to get some buy-in in the school or with the entire district. If those students feel compelled to talk to board members or anything like that. So there's probably things already going on in your district, and it's just being able to talk to the right people and get connected so you guys can grow and like collaborate together.
Great. OLENA, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. We've all spoken about this before, but partnerships and collaboration with community partners is huge. Having City of Calgary, Calgary Board of Education, and all our educational partners kind of speaking the same language and pointing to our programs the same way really helps. As well as having a dedicated waste and recycling coordinator, which we have. We are also a small but mighty team, and it really helps to have somebody dedicated to that file, providing support on the operational and educational side.
Yeah, great. Amanda?
Yeah, I would just want to say that one of the things that has helped me the most is really just nurturing relationships that I have with these eco champions. Always making sure their questions are answered, they have the resources they need, because when you strengthen that relationship, you'll be able to call on them when you're like, I have this new program idea. I don't know if it'll be good. Let me ask so-and-so. They'll tell me what they think. And so developing relationships and really hearing the concerns, and I know that's real basic. It's just because we're all humans, and so we need the face-to-face. We need the human interaction. And then beyond the face-to-face, of course, is just we're trying our best to just have so many different ways to communicate with everyone. Like we have our webpage, our learning platform, like our principals' weekly emails, that Teams chat I mentioned, and monthly. We just try everything and see what sticks. Because our teachers are so busy, and so I don't want to add any work on their part at all. I want to make everything as easy as a click away, or just barely that. So I'm always thinking about the relationships and then making the job easier for teachers.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's always a little bittersweet to get to the end of a program and run out of time, because we have many other directions we could take the conversation. But I do want to thank all three of you. This is fantastic. Each of you brings such a rich story of what you're doing locally, and some of these, there are commonalities between your programs, but I think you also reflect the diversity that there are unique circumstances for everybody's programs and what we bring to the table. But I really appreciate each of you taking the time to participate in the panel. So I have a couple housekeeping items before I sign off. And in a moment, I'm going to invite a couple of colleagues up here, Michelle and Rebecca, who are from our sales team with Busch Systems. We make a conscious effort that we keep a firewall between our program and the marketing side, but I do want to point out that Busch Systems sells a lot of great recycling and waste bin products, and I want for those who want to stick around and learn more about those, I'll be bringing Michelle and Rebecca up in just a moment to talk about those some more. Before I do, want to point out some resources that are available. As I mentioned at the beginning, the recording and the presentation slides from today will be posted to our website. We'll be sending an email out to everybody who registered for the program in the next day or two, so that you can access those. We also have some of the resources that our presenters were sharing. We dropped some of those into the chat during the program. We'll also have all of those links to the Austin's waste strategy, et cetera. All those we'll be making available as well when we send out that email. And then final thing is that we did a webinar very similar to this last August, where we had case study presentations from 3 other districts, including Simcoe County in Ontario, Montgomery County Public Schools in Maryland, and Salinas Valley Recycles in California. So if for those who want to keep diving down this topic and hear more about how other districts are running their programs, we do have the recording and slides available from that program as well. I think we may, Marissa may be dropping the link to go to the archive for that specific webinar into the chat box now, so you can click on that, and we'll also share that later. And so that's where I'm gonna sign off. I guess one last final thing would be, if you have or needing credit for continuing education units for different certification programs, we don't have a specific arrangement with any one certification to offer this, but this is a generic. We can provide a certificate of attendance if that is something that you want to submit and try to get credit for. Just email my colleague Marissa. You can see here Marissa c@buschsystems.com, or you can reach out to myself as well, and we can set you up with that. And so with that, I want to invite Michelle and Rebecca up here, and I'm going to let them take it away with the product demo. Thank you, everybody, for attending.
Perfect. Thank you, Alec, and thank you to our panelists today as well. I've had the pleasure of working with some of you, and your programs are absolutely fantastic. So thanks again for supporting us in the webinar and sharing your experiences and your program successes and whatnot. I'm here with my colleague, Rebecca. I'm Michelle. We've been with Busch Systems for a long time. I won't age us, but we're your education specialist team. So we do work with all K-12 schools, colleges, universities in both Canada and the US as well. So we get asked several questions on programs on a daily basis, what other schools are doing. It's always very helpful to use us as well as a support system in what other schools are doing and ask us questions that way. We had a lot of talk about grants today in our webinar, bond programs. I know my signature at work is talking about COVID relief funding. So please ask us about that as well when you're calling in for ideas on building a recycling program. How can you qualify for those grants, find that money? And on that note too, we are part of a lot of education co-ops. So being part of those co-ops or being on some of those contracts, you do qualify for additional discounts. So please ask us about that in your state as well. And then we can help you out with those special pricing.
And speaking of that, we also do, I know there's a company in Alberta that does grants for recycling containers as well for their returnables or refundable program. So that's something to look in if you're in the province of Alberta.
We did see a lot of our wastewater systems in our slideshow presentations today. I know the Calgary Board of Education had their nice one up there. Amanda, of course, with Austin as well, Independent School District. So we thought we would start with this one because it is probably the most popular centralized container with not just K-12 schools, but colleges and universities as well. A big part of the presentation today, and I think Alec had some slides up there, and I don't know if he's still around and he can pop some up, but there we go. Some slides that we've just worked with a local school here in Barrie Nouvelle Alliance, and you can see right from the beginning their student engagement, student involvement. I know that Mandy touched base on finding clubs, green clubs, things like that. So these photos here are actually the students of the Green Club actually opening the boxes right from the start. They're labeling them. They've got their custom labels that they're putting on the front, but in some of the photos you can see obviously the restrictive openings, the colors. They do have signage as well on the back, which is so important. And as we spoke so much today about the signage on the back, and Alec mentioned the University of Georgia as well, with our wastewater system here, you can see the back signage. You can customize those to your program, so whatever you're collecting, and also color coordinate it to your stream. This one here is our Excel. It's a little bit larger to promote recycling. It's 32 gallons. You'll see the restrictive opening. This is the Saturn shape for mixed recycling, but again, it comes in circle slots, lift lid here for compost, waste, you name it. I'm trying not to make noise. You'll see some labels on the front too. You can customize those. This one here is shown in a gray body, as seen in the Calgary Board of Education, their slideshow today. But Amanda, I know she showcased one that had black bodies and blue. And as you can see from some of the slideshows that Alec's posting as well, you've got a black body there. The students are actually putting on the signage and the sign frames too. So student engagement and student involvement is so important in the buy-in of your program, starting from the ground up and getting this, you know, kindergarten students all the way up to the high school level. With this system here, you can connect it. This is on a dolly. I'm not sure if you can see it or not moving around, so we don't have the bins connected, but you can connect them as well to create more of a station so that one doesn't go missing. Rebecca, if you want to touch base on showcase the lift lid and.
Oh, sure. So this one is for organics or compost, and the lid just lifts right up there and then closes so that the scent of the compost or organic stays inside the bin instead of wafting throughout the kitchen like some people may use with fish in the lunchroom, which is always fun. Also, we have the waste opening, which is just a large rectangle as well. And I'm not sure if you saw the signs on the showcase that we just did, but those were custom signs in French and English. So we do have an amazing graphics team that can do up any custom signage for you as well.
And just to touch base on the sizes, you'll see, hopefully you can see, this is a smaller, slimmer unit. It's 23 gallons paired with the 32 gallons. So we have 6 different sizes in this series. They're all made out of recycled plastic as well, regardless of the color that you choose. But you can mix and match the sizes if you want to promote a larger recycling, a smaller container for waste and whatnot. We do have some as showcased as well on today's webinar. People put custom labels on the front of the bin also. All right.
Is that it for the waste?
I think so.
All right. I'm doing this very eloquently.
Perfect.
So I look nice on camera still. Next, we have our Aristata unit. Now, this is instead of modular like the waste watchers, this is one unit. We do sell this in a single, double, and triple. This one is obviously a triple. Now, the lid is stainless steel and it lifts up like that. And you can see the restrictive openings on the lid there. We also sell the triple in all full openings, which is all the rectangle as well. These do have ergonomic liners inside. Now these are 15 gallons each, and we do carry this in an XL unit as well. Now these liners do just hang on the side of the unit so that you can just take the bag out, and it makes it ergonomically better for the sanitation to take the garbage bags out. And then they just slide right back in there. Now this is a melamine product, and we do have a number of different finishes here to suit your area. And there are jelly labels just on the front here to let you know what's being collected in each stream. Now this particular unit, we also have the addition of a sign frame at the back. Again, we discussed how signage definitely helps your waste diversion. And this unit is also on casters. Now those are just extra add-ons that you can get for these containers.
I know Alec briefly mentioned the fact that a lot of programs are going to self-servicing and having that centralized area or centralized station where people that work in the offices are now bringing their own waste and recycling to a centralized container or a centralized station. This is more so popular in colleges and universities, but it is also popular within offices in K-12 schools as well, in the nicer atrium areas and things like that, where you're looking for a little bit more of a higher end look, a higher scale, but still getting across the fact that there are different streams. There are, still trying to increase diversion rates and get the message across. So that's where that really comes in handy. And then, of course, as I mentioned, the nicer areas because it's more aesthetically pleasing.
Perfect.
Okay. I'm going to move these smaller classroom containers out of the way and just go, since we're talking about centralized containers. This is our Spectrum series. It is made out of a powder-coated metal. We do work with several different materials, including, as we've already seen, the melamine products, the plastic products. We work with plastic, lumber, stainless steel as well. And again, this is powder-coated metal. These are individual modular units. So as we know, there are several programs changing in terms of and new mandates happening in all different states, including the addition of composting. That's now a requirement in several of the states. And a modular system is very nice for that reason, that as your program grows, you just add on another container. So these are individual pretty heavy duty units. They're not going to be kicked away to the side, that's for sure. We're showcasing 2 different sizes here, and in this system we also have 6 different sizes. So we have a larger size all the way up to a 32 gallon and the smallest being an 8-gallon container. So it really can work if you're looking for bathroom collection in smaller areas where the footprint might be a little tight. You can still mix and match your program so that the bins look the same, but just work with the space that you have in that area. You'll see again, hopefully, the restrictive openings. This one is a circle for cans and bottles. They all have plastic liners inside as well. And I'm trying not to make noise, but if Rebecca, you'll see these holes here, and that really is to keep the bag nice and tidy. So you can put your liner inside, tie them at the corner. No bags will ever overhang the side of the unit. It's very, very clean, concise looking. With the signage as well in the back, you can customize that to your program however you would like, or choose from our stock signage. We do have these stocked in several different colors as well. So you can see here, obviously, the blue, the green, and the black, but we have gray and white as well. So if you are looking for a uniform station, perhaps all gray with colored signs, you can do that as well. It's always an option. This one here at the very end is our antimicrobial lid. And it's a new lid that we came out with to combat the bacteria from COVID. So it actually fights off bacteria and kills it off 99.9% within, I think, 2 hours. And we do have a slideshow presentation on this if that's something that you're interested in. It does work well on the bin. And also, if you already have a system in place, but you are looking to upgrade your lids, that's something that can always be added after the fact. I know Rebecca briefly touched on custom labels and custom signage. Again, with all of our systems, you can choose to do that and match your program to whatever you would like.
Okay, well, and let's my hands on the multi-recycler. So let's go to this this unit here. So you can see these are stackable units. These are great for some of the younger grades if you have the students carrying the recycling or the waste to a centralized station, because obviously the handles and they stack up wonderful. These are just 6-gallon containers, and we stock them in a variety of different colors. So these ones are very popular in the younger grades and colleges and universities in the dorms.
It's true. And why they're so popular too in the classroom, obviously space is limited. You can see here that these are stacked. We only had blue to showcase today, but in your program, if you do have, let's say, in a blue, gray, and green, and you're looking to stack all the different colors to showcase the different streams, and then have students just dump them to the centralized area. So it's really, really clear. You can label the front depending on the quantity. If you're looking for a particular a minimum order, you can get them custom stamped in what you're looking to collect in them, or have your school logo. We also offer custom colors for anything over 200 as well. So that's just an option if you're looking to have them in school colors. We've done that before too.
Perfect. Do you want to talk about the Billy boxes now, Michelle? Let's put them up here so
Yeah,
you guys can see them. I'm obviously the brains of the two of us.
Debatable. So we have worked together for a long time.
Sorry.
These are our Billy box containers. They're larger, they're 10 gallons, but they're very, again, popular with classroom sizes. We offer these in 3 different sizes, as small as 14 quart, all the way up to the 41 quart, which is this in a 10-gallon size. You can get them with or without a lid. So even if this lid just pops off, it can be added on after the fact as well, and just have the color-coded streams this way set up in your classroom if you're looking, for the students to easily put in their materials. Or if you are looking for that added, as we talked about, the restricted openings and the streams and the labelings, you can choose to get different options and different labels across. So this one is a swing lid for waste. Rebecca's holding the mixed for recycling, the organic ones at the end, but of course we have a paper slot lid, a circle lid as well. And we do have this in different colors, and you can get them as well for a minimum of 200 if you're looking to have them custom stamped, as we talked about, or different color options.
Yeah, or you can get it without this piece in here completely and have it wide open and just have the frame on there with the label if you wanted to do that as well. These are popular if you want something smaller than a waste watcher, but bigger than the multi series there. So it's a nice in between. I've actually just sold a bunch of these to a college, and they're really suitable for the classroom keep with your color scheme. And yeah.
I know Austin Independent School District, they use these as well. They had on their slide panel, they showcase the front label. So they do put a very, very nice, clear and concise label on all of their bins, especially if you're choosing not to go with the restrictive lid. It's always a nice idea and a nice addition to add that label on the front. Okay. Now, obviously, we didn't bring all of our containers here. We just have a little showcase or a tidbit of what we can offer. We have over 200 products. We are, as I mentioned before, we work with several different materials. We're on several different education cooperatives, and we are a B Corp company too. So being sustainable from start to finish is very, very important to us, from the packaging to the transportation, you name it, in all departments. We will quickly just touch base. We have several outdoor containers, a full line of those units, but we only have one to showcase today, and it was actually on the Calgary Board of Education. They showcased a triple unit of this, but this is our Uptown. It is made of heavy duty recycled plastic. I don't know if the door opens. We might have put our bins too close. I mean, it opens, of course it is. There's a key to life system here. I don't know if we can, I'll just talk about the front labels.
Nice and quiet.
Yeah, you can label the front and the openings however you would like. We stock these in particular badges, but you can label them in different, verbiage if that's something that's important to you, if you're collecting something outside of the box that we don't have stocked. Inside, you'll find 32-gallon label or 32-gallon liners. So that's in this particular double. It's very, very easy to clean. We live here in a snow belt, so we get hit with pretty extreme weather conditions. This unit is heavy, heavy duty. It's meant to withstand all the elements, not rust. It's very easy to get graffiti off. The slanted lid is particularly important on this unit because we're trying to avoid anybody, putting their garbage on the top and things like that. And of course, the sleet and snow just slides right off of it.
And I don't know if you could see when the door was open, but these openings actually have a deflector in the bottom inside so that the trash or the recycling goes right into the liner as well. It doesn't fall in between the door and the liner. So that's very handy.
So those are just some of the most popular that we have for indoor and outdoor. As I mentioned, we have so many different containers. If you don't see one here that would meet your program, I know ALEC took a poll and it seemed like a lot of you were just at the beginning stages or don't have anything in place at all. If you are not even looking to purchase bins, but just want to use this as a resource, ALEC mentioned we do those webinars on a monthly basis, but also we have several case studies. We use him actually as our senior advisor on he writes several blogs, and he's polling different schools all of the time and writing the trends and best practices and things like that. So we're always a good resource just to even call and say, what are you seeing? What are the trends? What are you suggesting? We need to find money. How can we get, the buy-in from students, from faculty? Feel free, give us a call. We're not just here selling bins, but we're selling, the overall experience. Thank you. Anyway, I'm hoping that Marissa will put in both of our emails. I'm sure she will in the chat. If you want to reach out to us, we'd be happy to send you any information along with our contact information, our catalogs, anything like that on the contracts, the cooperatives, as I mentioned, or just finding, how to find that grant money and use that COVID relief funding if you can get your hands on it. So I don't know if we have any questions, Marissa, if you're back there, I think we're back.
I'm here.
Oh, there we go. I'm quite a few there.
All good, all good. We did have a couple questions come in that if you guys wouldn't mind touching on, that would be great. One individual did ask if the lids can be changed later or purchased individually if the streams change, but the bins themselves are not, but maybe the restrictive openings are going to change.
Yes, for sure, except maybe on the Aristata unit because this comes assembled already, though I think you can purchase the lid afterwards. I just don't get that one very often. But on the Spectrums, yes. The Billy boxes, yes. The Waste Watchers, yes. They're actually sold individual. We can piece them out, no problem at all.
Yeah, you are able to. And a lot of schools already have bins in place. Maybe they have old slimline containers that they're currently using, but they want to update it. They want to add the sign frames. They want to add the lids. I have several schools that are using currently our lids and our sign frames that are not even actually on the bodies of our bins. So don't hesitate to ask, hey, will it fit? Because we do have that information, or sometimes we can send out a sample to see if it will fit your existing bins and spruce them up and make them look like a whole new program, and the effort is there, but just without the overall, you know, spending budget behind it. So.
Yeah, we want to stay within your budget. So
yeah,
cost effective.
Awesome. And I think you both touched on this already a couple times, but just because we saw them in the webinar, a couple people mentioned that it was very cool to see the yellow bins that the one school was using for their refundables. I believe the stream was what it was called. Can you guys elaborate on any of the bins that come in some cooler and or different colors?
Sure. The yellow is really popular with our waste watchers, which are what we saw with the Calgary Board of Education. I do know the yellow is popular with composting. Just to throw out a school in the US, I know Johns Hopkins, they use yellow as their color in Maryland for yellow as compost. So we offer that with a circle. We offer it with a larger rectangle. We offer it on our larger sizes as well as our slimmer sizes. To offset, I do have some companies and schools that actually use our spectrum in yellow, and although we don't stock it, how they get around it is they they will just do a yellow sign. And I've even had somebody, because we do all of our printing in-house, it's very cost effective for us to do custom labels, and they chose to do a heavy duty vinyl label all the way down the front of the bin to showcase and make it look yellow. We do have an Evolve system here as well, which is not in this room, but the front, you have an option as a large sign that consumes the entire body, and you can have that yellow. So you can create the illusion of a yellow body, you know, system.
And with the plastic bins, like our waste watchers or our billy boxes, there is a minimum run. We do stock some lids in red or brown, and there's a minimum run of 200 units if you're looking for a specific color, or if it's an exact custom color, say it's a purple to match your school colors, that could be a higher minimum quantity, but it's something that we can always do. We can custom paint the spectrums. You're just looking at a minimum quantity as well, and those the quantity is a little bit higher, so you just the plastic's a lot easier, and the multis for the custom colors as well.
Yeah, and we do stock the multis in a yellow color, so that's an option too. We stock this bin in 5 different colors, being yellow, blue, green, gray.
I don't think we stock it black anymore, do we?
So 4 colors.
This is not a test.
Awesome, thank you. And just one last quick question. A lovely woman asked about the dolly that the waste watchers were on, and if we supply that as well, or if that is something they have to grab separately.
We do supply it, and the nice thing about our dolly too is that you can customize it to fit your bins. So the one system that we showed you was a 32-gallon paired with 2 23-gallons. So it actually has an expanding unit on the dolly. Oh, perfect. Rebecca's just bringing it over, and you can add on to it. So if your system grows or changes, you can just continue to add on to the dolly. If you had 2 of the larger sizes, but only 1 of the 23-gallon size, then you could do that as well. You can mix and match to the size of your bins. It's heavy duty, as Rebecca was
just, I don't want to say that.
Yeah. It is made of metal. The wheels, as you can see, are easy to move, easy to maneuver. It's very easy for students as well to push it down the hall. Maybe they're taking the bins to a larger dumpster area. It's fun for them to do also. And then you can either connect the bins inside or just leave them unattached as we have today, which makes it very, very easy for dumping.
So because I'm holding it up, obviously you can see how it goes a little bit. That's how they're connected. When it's on the ground, it obviously isn't shaking and the bins are in there, so there's no bending or anything like that, but it's just easy bolts that go right in there.
And as you can connect them, you can also take away. So I know in the past, people have gone from a triple stream, then they've gone to a mixed stream where it's just mixed recycling and all the recycling goes into one bin and then waste. And now we are seeing a lot of people go back to that source separation of the papers, the cans and bottles, and the waste. So you can take away or add on with this dolly system.
All right, fantastic. And I haven't seen any other questions come in, but I want to thank you both, Michelle and Rebecca, for your time. Thank you so much, and your lovely Vanna White abilities. Very much appreciated. If you do have any questions that occur to you afterwards, or as Michelle said, you just want to use us as a resource, absolutely let us know. You can find out more about us on our website, buschsystems.com. And if you are having a coffee moment tomorrow and you can't remember our lovely sales reps' names, sales@buschsystems.com will also get you to the direct people. If you cannot reach out to Michelle or Rebecca directly, their emails are in the chat. And otherwise, feel free to reach out to us anytime. Thank you again, both, so much. Thank you to everyone who tuned in for our product showcase here. Is there anything you two would like to finish off with?
No, we don't have a comedy sketch, so we're not on the road at all.
Okay.
No battles are happening here. Not today.
All right, fantastic. Thank you again both so much. Thank you to all who tuned in for this, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks again,
Bye.
everyone.